Christine Marie, and tonight we're going to be talking just about some things that have been on my mind recently and some things that are going on that are coming up on the knowing front, and then also a few things on the craft and calling side. I just came back from Amazon headquarters here in Virginia, and it was an incredible, if anyone has ever been to any of the Amazon headquarters. I'm actually unsure of how many they have. I know that they've got their headquarters in California and then their headquarters here in Virginia. The actual address had Amazon HQ2 on it. So I don't know if this was their second headquarters that was created, and then they've got others around the world. I'm not sure, but it was an incredible building. Their brand clearly, the quality of their brand is clearly reflective in the way that they actually care for their employees. I think that that's something that more and more top tier brands are doing these days, is just really cultivating the space for their employees. That frankly, especially after COVID, it's like, what's the incentive to come in and work anymore? And more companies have been investing in the space in which their employees exist to really cultivate the culture there. And it was so evident being there at Amazon. And it wasn't just for their employees. They have a lot of other companies coming in and hosting events there. And so DC Startup Week is being hosted there. And I was on the panel yesterday and moderated a fireside chat today. It was an amazing conversation with Matt Boudère-Shapiro. He's the CMO of the fastest growing company in the US. And we had such a good conversation. He also was the founder. His business was acquired by this company, and then he's also an investor too. So he's worn all the hats, and it was a riveting conversation and so fun to be in the moderator chair, but then also being in the panel chair yesterday. It's fun. It's fun being able to guide the conversation. I think that that's something maybe I taken for granted. When you're on the other side and you're the one being interviewed, you can only control the conversation so much. I've thought about this actually a lot, being in the podcast guest chair. So much of the conversations that I remember, even, there's been so many podcasts I've been on, and the ones that really stand out to me are the ones where the hosts are so good and they ask such good questions because they pull it out of you. And then the guest is excited, the host is excited because they know it's going somewhere exciting. And there's just this, David Hawkins talks about leveling up of energetic levels, which is effectively assigning a numerical value to an emotion. And I feel my emotions elevate in terms of frequency as I'm having conversations with people, and we're so connected, and there's such good passion kind of being exchanged and such good frequency. Honestly, I love when people actually kind of describe what they mean when they say frequency. And I just love the way David Hawkins puts it. It's effectively the numerical value associated with higher levels of emotions and the energy associated with that. And I like to use the example, if you see, David who's slunched down and has his shoulders small, and he's actually feeling really a lot of shame for himself and in himself, that physically manifests in the way that he holds his body, his posture, the way that he speaks to you, his tonality, versus Sandra over there, who is doing something that she loves. She's so excited about her life. She's full of passion, and she's at a higher frequency, even one of courage, which is higher than shame. You can tell when people are living in that higher frequency state because their physical output literally manifests in the way that they're showing up to the world. And so when we're having these conversations and we are the guest versus the host really controls so much of that. And I've still had good conversations with folks who don't have a high frequency level and a higher energetic state. There's still a lot that the guest can do to guide the conversation and make sure that it's still a positive one that's encouraging and impactful. But man, when the host is on point, when the host is when I say on point, when the host is really alive and you feel their energy and you can feed off of that, and they're asking questions because they're really listening, man, it's so dynamic and it's so fun. So today's conversation was really fun because I got to play the host and make it my conversation. When I was asked to do this rather at the last minute, and I got a call at 5 a.m. from a dear friend of mine. She's hosting this whole week and putting it on, and she and the co-founder, man, it's just so impressive what they've built. There had to have been close to 1,000 people at Amazon headquarters today, and they had so many workshops happening, so many panels, so many keynotes, and there are people in every room and so many early stage companies. And one of the things that, just to that point of, well, actually, I'm going to go down that road. It was really cool seeing how what started with such a small community 10 years ago, this is their 10th anniversary. Now today it's just reaching so many people. And as I'm standing in the back, as I'm sitting on stage, it's really just been I guess even just convicting for me in a way. Like I actually feel a conviction as I'm thinking about what it is that they built. They were willing to start with small beginnings. And I think so many of us, it's so easy to want to get to the big flashy thing. I'm looking at people with the videos that they're putting out from Sora, and they're walking the red carpet and lights are flashing all around them, and they're standing on stage with all the lights surrounding them. And we all want that to an extent. We want to have the impact that would allow for us to be on center stage, or maybe, you want just the attention. But there's something about the name and lights, and there's something about having a monument in your honor, and there's something about making so much impact in the world that you deserve the big center stage and the thunderous round of applause. But starting out so small, and y'all, that's where I am. I'm working my way. I have a vision for knowing that it will be as we know Oprah, it will be knowing. That's my hope, and that's like my vision, kind of in a nutshell, is that knowing will be its own entity, likened to Oprah. Not, honestly, not Christine Marie. It's knowing. Like I want knowing to be something that really changes the way people experience life, the way that they show up for their families, the way that they operate in business, that it's coming from a place where all of their intelligences are online. I was describing someone today, they're like, well, what's the knowing show? And I was like, well, we talk about, activating the intellectual intelligence, the emotional intelligence, and the third intelligence, artificial intelligence. And once they kind of were leaning in then and interested, it's like, and there's the physical intelligence. Bessel van der Kolk wrote this book. The gentleman and the psychotherapist who actually coined PTSD, he wrote the book, Body Keeps a Score. And it's all about how our body stores trauma. Our body stores intelligence. So we've got a physical intelligence and we've got a spiritual intelligence. There is divine revelation that so many of us have experienced when in a kind of a spiritual environment that is hard to put into words and hard to really describe. But we all know, we know what it's like to have that kind of inner knowing, that uncanny element of like, I don't know how I know this, but I do. And so we've got all of these different intelligences. And so the question is, well, how do we activate that and allow for each one of those to come online? And I was actually having a really interesting conversation with a professor at I think it's UMBC. He was a professor there, and another university as well. He was talking about how effectively how education is, and he was talking higher education, how they're really looking to incorporate more trainings about AI. And I just had this thought as he was talking, pre-K even, everything from kindergarten through high school, everything's kind of being forced to change. We're being forced to adjust to this new emerging technology in terms of, okay, we need to adapt our programs to adapt with this new world. And what's so exciting is that if we can do it right and well, we could adapt. Since we're already going to be adapting the public school systems, what if we were to adapt the actual educational materials and the programmings in the schools to allow for the understanding of these other intelligences? How does the body actually work? How does finances actually work? Becoming financially intelligent. How do our emotions work? We graduate school, we enter the workforce, and so much of it is predicated on relationships. We start dating in high school, and no one teaches us how to engage in relationships. Ideally, you have parents who do that, but gosh, if they don't know, we're learning through trial and error. And how much trial and error do you have to have in order to finally stumble into a healthy one? And we're just in this really interesting time where someone said the other day, emotional intelligence is a luxury. And yeah, intellectual intelligence is a luxury too. There was a time where people couldn't go to school because they had to work in the fields, and they had to work at, the education system today was so predominantly set forth by Rockefeller family to train industry laborers. And that was the intent of early primary education. And so now today, now that we're not all working in the industrial revolutional times, and we're not working with machines, our education program needs to change. And just like how back then to go to school was a luxury, yes, it is. There is an element where to cultivate these other intelligences is a luxury, and what a blessing that is. And now even more than ever before, especially with these bots coming in. And y'all, this is a real aspect of what we're experiencing in the world, that there are going to be a lot of jobs that are going to be called into question because robotics are going to be able to do it better than us, because it's replacing the IQ and even in some ways the EQ. I was just chatting with a friend tonight who's using ChatGPT as a therapist, and I've done the same thing. I've got a bot who's worked with me on a couple of things. And granted, I will say it's dangerous because it is so biased towards us. Even someone close to me, he and I had a conversation. We recorded it. We put, and honestly, I was kind of like, let's see what happens. We both put the recording into our respective GPTs, and we're like, can you give an objective, unbiased position? Both of our GPTs were in fact very biased towards us and against the other person. And I just thought how dangerous that is, because we go in with good intent to have this very powerful machine be unbiased and give us a third party objective point of view. And in one sense, how unbiased could it be because it's a machine? But we've conditioned it so much, if it is a bot that we use for in other regards and other use cases for our personal life or business or otherwise, they're trained by us for us. And so of course they're going to have a bias. And that was really telling, that these machines are not coming forward in an unbiased manner. And with the cultivation of these robotic process automations, RPA and AI and Web3, just so much emerging technology, it is so much more important than ever before that we're cultivating the human being. And so much of that is the intangible. It's the soul, it's the spirit, it's our inner world, our inner selves. And so with all of that, the external, what's happening out there, what is all of our external service offerings rooted in? How are we actually differentiating ourselves from our competitors? And are we? Because that is ultimately going to be rooted in who we are. I was talking with another individual today at the event. There's so many products. There's so many products being created left and right. And being in this space, it was so fun. There were so many budding entrepreneurs with amazing startups and so many cool ideas. And you can create with Lovable, you can create an app just with the snap of your fingers if you know how. It's really, really powerful and so potent what's possible. But are we actually solving for, well, this goes into a broader conversation. Given that there's so much product and service opportunity, are we actually creating products that are predicated in a real need, meeting a real audience? And do we even have a brand differentiated enough that's going to set our product aside when there's a competitor creating one just like it down the street? And so how do we allow for our brands to be our biggest assets, the cultivation of them, to attract the right people, both in terms of customers and also talent, and allowing for the brand to be the key divide, the differentiator? You look at Starbucks and you look at Dunkin' and McDonald's. McDonald's is categorically, in all blind taste test studies, they are ranked better tasting coffee with Dunkin' is number 2 and Starbucks is number 3. But Starbucks has established such a strong brand surrounding the experience of the coffee that people are buying for an experience. They're buying for a status and holding, I have my little water glass here, but holding a Starbucks cup versus holding a Dunkin' cup lends to a very different perception of the individual. And I mean, even, gosh, where were we? Oh, last week on the cruise. It was so amazing. We were in this beautiful little port town. We were in, no, we weren't there. I don't know. We were in some wonderful Italian port, and my sister and I grabbed our Starbucks from the boat and then got off the boat. And of course, it's like, this is blasphemous to be carrying an American Starbucks coffee cup around an Italian town. I cannot tell you how many people stopped me and asked where I bought Starbucks. And I was like, I bought this on the boat. Don't look at me. Like, go get an Italian espresso. But there's something about that with the recognition of it and the experience that people know that they're going to have when they have this cup in their hand. And honestly, the notable element there. Greg, I just saw your comment on Facebook. I love Dunkin'. My sister is like a diehard Dunkin' fan, and she refuses to drink Starbucks. And it's so funny, because once we have that emotional tie to whatever the brand is, man, now you've got the lover and the hater. And that's what a strong brand does, is that they demarcate. They actually put a line in the sand and say, kind of, you're for us or against us. And that requires such an element of, we were talking earlier about how there's the emotional frequencies and leveling up of the emotional frequencies. Courage is higher than guilt and shame. And it's actually courageous of these brands to draw a line in the sand and say, this is who we are. This is the experience you're going to have. You're going to like it or hate it. And we don't care which one. And we know that we're going to have lovers, and we know we're going to have haters. Same thing with Android and Apple. Man, people get vicious around their Android products versus their Apple products. Even the way that Apple has organized the product, even of itself, how you can't share your contact card if it's not an Apple user. Everyone who's not an Apple user shows up green, and it immediately kind of isolates everyone who's not an Apple user. So they've built in community in the strength of their brand by way of these elements that obviously demarcate other people who are not with us. Therefore, you're not of us. And so this otherness kind of sets the brand apart and really allows for the lure of the experience. People will camp out overnight for the release of the new Apple product, because they know that it's just such an experience of the camp out in and of itself. I saw this picture of, I believe it was near or around Times Square, of people just camping out overnight with tents up, and people are so excited. Chick-fil-A does this too with the new Chick-fil-A opening. People will camp out overnight. And Greg, you just said winning brands lead a rebellion. It is so true. And y'all, we see this. I mean, in one sense, brands have stronger power in a lot of regards. We're seeing this more and more than some politicians. Talk about some, and I won't even say the artists, but there's certain musical artists that if they were to run for any kind of office or any kind of big political space, I would be so curious to see what happens, because they have so many lovers, and they're avid. They're like vicious people on behalf of these brands that they love. And so the question is, do you have a differentiated brand when all the products are becoming so commoditized these days? There's so many options, and it's becoming more accessible at your fingertips than ever before. And so this element of who are you is so incredibly important. And we need to be asking this question of ourselves, of our companies, and do the work to go deeper, because the brand truly is the greatest asset, the trust associated with that. I was during the fireside chat interview with this gentleman who successfully exited his company, sold it to what now is today the number one fastest growing company in the US, and he's the CMO now. He said that trust was one of the most important aspects, and that effectively his brand was buying the trust that he had solidified with his clients. And so if there was one aspect, and I asked him, I was like, well, how are you measuring trust? Like, what's the KPI that you guys are looking for? And he said, LTV, customer lifetime value. And for those who didn't know, in the audience, I just broke it down very simply. It's effectively at the end of the purchase. What happens then? Does the customer repeat? Does the customer become a member? Does the customer subscribe? Like, how long is the actual lifetime of the customer beyond just that one-time click or that one-time checkout? And really being able to analyze the LTV was so incredibly important. One of our other clients, I was the CMO for a really massive home service company. And one of the biggest things that we saw was that we were getting 25 to 30% repeat customers. 20 to 30% of their total customers were repeat customers for home services. Like, that's amazing. And what was so interesting was that it wasn't just, as I was helping them kind of think about LTV, I said, okay, well, what are additional products? Now that they trust us to do this one thing, what are additional products that we can add to expand the opportunities? Kind of thinking of it as a funnel. Okay, this customer came in and took action in this one regard. Okay, what are the other tendrils? What are the other multiple different, think of it as a tree trunk. So the tree trunk itself is ultimately the initial first purchase. But then all the roots of the tree, all the tendrils thereafter are opportunities and pathways for the customer to reconvert, to re-engage, to stay connected, to stay engaged. And so, yes, it could be a product, it could be a membership, it could be some semblance of a subscription. But the more that we're thinking about our current customers are the bloodline and lifeline of our company. And how do we turn them into our greatest assets and turn them into our greatest marketers? Because it is way cheaper to turn our existing customer base into marketers rather than paying for a new lead every time. One of our clients, I found, man, it was so wild to find this. We were getting them a lot of leads, and I just was paying attention to the customer journey. Okay, so top of the funnel, lead comes in, they schedule an appointment, they become, they schedule the job, they become a customer, and then we complete the job. And I was just kind of curious, like, where are the main breakdowns happening? And one of the biggest things that I really, really love doing with companies, I actually really love like the first 60 to 90 days working with them. We get really deep into their business. We really get to know them. We really go on this kind of excavation of who they are, who their customers are, what the data says. And then it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do from here on out? And what I find so often in the analyzation of that customer journey is that there are so many points of breakdown throughout, from the lead coming all the way down to the completion of the sale. And when I say the completion of the sale, I mean, it's not that, oh, the money's in the bank. It's that, no, we've actually done fulfillment. We're done. Like, we send them the thank you note. And when I say that, what I mean is that I found so many times that there was a company, and I'll give a specific example. One of our clients, I found that in 1 year alone, 11% of every single sold job, they ended up canceling. So they literally had to refund the customer 11% out of all the customers. They had to refund 11% of the jobs. Y'all, that is horrifying. That is so horrifying. That is money in the bank. That's guaranteed work. That's actual sales made. That's, money in the bank and food on the table for your team, that all of a sudden now you got to pull back. And now you've got to go back and find an additional 11% at the top of the funnel. It is so much cheaper to invest in customer retention than cold traffic. So with investing in the brand, it's not just how you look, sound, the engagement online. It's all the way through at every single moment of the customer experience, beyond fulfillment to the thank you, to the checkout. And the bonus here ideally is that you're looking even beyond that to, okay, what is the actual lifetime cycle, the lifetime value, the lifetime potential and potency of this customer. And so with that, I am hosting a series of workshops. I'm so excited about this, starting next Thursday, October 30th. I decided to make this one free, frankly, because I didn't get the word out soon enough. So this one's free, October 30th at noon Eastern next week. I would love, love, love for you guys to come. We're doing the inner work first. We have to know who we are in order to then ensure that the external manifests appropriately, accurately differentiated from everyone around us, but it starts within. So we're going to focus on brand story. We're going to focus on kind of the core tenets of who we are, and it's going to be 90 minutes. So frankly, there's only so much we can get through, but I'm going to give you some exercises for you to do on the other side. Greg, you just said in costume. Ha! Yes. You need to show up in costume. I love that. That's so good. Um, costume or no costume. I'm gonna think about that. I'm gonna think about whether we should be in costume or not. October 30th, noon Eastern. I'm gonna drop the link here in the chat. Super excited about this. The second one is gonna be November 20th. The third is December 18th. And the second one, November 20th, we're actually really talking about strategic alignment and getting ourselves really focused and honed in on what is my vision? What do I want? What am I building in terms of the external? And when I talk, I love talking legacy. Legacy is ultimately the outcome of knowing. It's what are we building? What's a long term here? What's going to outlast me and outlive me? Yet right now, today, every single moment, we're creating legacy. So that's number 2. That's kind of workshop number 2, November 20th. December 18th, we're actually going to be building out the roadmap for 2026. I hate getting to the end of the year and feeling rushed or pressure and like I haven't put my head into the next season. I like doing this every 6 months. What's my roadmap for the next 6 months? What do I have to show for these 6 months? What do I want to show for the next 6 months? So doing it in 6-month increments for me is much more tangible and practical. And it's like, okay, that finish line is going to be here soon. Let me actually build for that. So I am going to drop here the link for that. And I hope you guys can come. Next week is free. So no excuses. Let's come. Costume or no costume, I will let you know. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. And I will see you all tomorrow on the Know